Today, our guest shares her extraordinary journey of navigating profound loss and choosing joy in the face of tragedy. After losing her husband to a sudden brain aneurysm, Marie made a conscious decision to grieve differently. A mother, best-selling author, and TEDx speaker, she now dedicates her life to shifting the narrative around grief. Today, we explore how empowering, healing, and even happiness are possible after heartbreak. This conversation will challenge what you think you know about grief and invite you to see the hidden gifts. Marie Alessi, thank you so much for being with us on Trauma Undone, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Natasha. I just really love that sentence. It will challenge you what you think you know about grief. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is in some ways something that I've dealt with my whole life, and I have never looked at it this way.
Yeah.
When I was 4, my brother, who was 7, passed away,
Mm.
and it completely shifted and changed our lives. I have
Yeah.
an older brother. We're actually discussing it yesterday. It's funny. And he said that like that day, life was never the same. So how are you able to take such tragedy and transmute it into something where you can experience empowerment and healing and joy? I mean, that's like the extreme. Like, I just even have to point that out. Like there's one thing to, living your life day by day, but actually taking it even that bit further.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. I really enjoy answering that, to be honest, because I feel it is truly a message that the world needs to hear. But before I delve into that, I just want to say my heart goes out to you and your other brother. I cannot claim to understand the loss of a sibling. And I also cannot claim to understand anybody's journey. But what I do understand is the way that I dealt with it. And I'm so happy to share that because I always feel maybe it gives people a new sense of direction or a slight different perspective or hope that they can get through this. And for me, it is never about what happened to you. It is what you do with it. And this is where our choices lie, and this is what our empowerment is, because a lot of people feel rather helpless and powerless after a person died. I much prefer saying that as well, and everybody's got their own choice of words. I used to talk about losing my husband. I've more and more worded it into my husband passed away, my husband transitioned, my husband passed away, because loss is such a negative and deep cutthroat word that we use for something that is never to be found again. And I don't feel like that with my husband. I honestly feel that he'll always be there to guide us. He's been one of my biggest supporters before and after his passing. And I still feel his guidance very strongly. It's very different these days, of course. And don't get me wrong, I truly missed being able to sit with him, talk to him, bounce ideas off, hear his opinion on things, and not having to learn, I'm going to get to that in a minute, how to actually trust my intuition, to really trust that inner guidance, my inner voice, whether that's intuition, whether that's him guiding me, whether that's love guiding me, whether that's the universe sending signs. You can see it from all sorts of perspectives. For me, it has become quite interchangeable. And why I put that having to under quotation marks is because I love reframes. You'll hear a lot from me about reframes. And one of my shortest and most favorite ones is when we change from I got to I get to. And that to me is such a little but really, really powerful shift in perspective. And to round this up, because I answered that in a very long way around, Rob and I actually had this what if conversation about shortly, like I'd say probably less than 3 years before he died. We had this what if conversation. He came home late from work one day and he called me on the phone and he's like, babe, I'm going to be like 2 hours late. There was an accident on Heathcote Road. It's the road that goes all the way straight through the national park. And if that is blocked, then it's a huge detour. And a 2 hour detour is a big inconvenience for most people, in particular when you have little kids waiting for the dad to come home. And for one family, it meant that their dad never made it home. He was a young dad, 16 months old daughter, first one, and it was a front-on collision with a truck. So that caused Rob and I to have that conversation. And it was so fiery at that moment. It was literally, shocking, and it hit home for us because our boys were so little. Yet we talk about it. What would you do? What would you do if I would never make it home? And our answer was, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. And that became my North Star in my darkest hour.
I mean, in some ways, it's kind of having had that conversation can be quite comforting because you have something to lean on. And it kind of also, did you feel like it gave you the freedom to move on?
It was an absolute encouragement from his end, and I knew that he meant it, even though both of us thought it was theory, that conversation. I know for a fact that we both meant what we said, because that's what love is. Love just wants you to be happy. It's that simple. And is it easy? Nope, not at all. It was not a flick the switch. Oh, Rob told me to be happy, let's move on. Not at all. Yet it gave me that direction. I had no idea how to get there, yet I knew where I was going, and that was really helpful. And I just want to say this here before any of your listeners think, oh, well, yeah, I never had this conversation, so I don't know what to do with that now. I understand, trust me, I do understand it is not the same, yet you can always have that conversation with them even after they passed. And I'm talking about an exercise that I've done hundreds of times with clients of mine, and even pass it on to two podcast hosts in interviews, and I just had one the other day where her mom passed away. She said, oh, thank you so much for that. This changed everything for me. And it is, I call it the letter, very simple. And it is you stepping into, in your case, your brother's perspective and looking at you and writing a letter from his perspective to you. What would he want for you right now? And I can promise you that would be full of laughter and joy and jokes and fun and hugs and dancing and embracing life and living the life that he did not get to live. That, to me, I'm absolutely certain of. And I know for a fact that that's what Rob wanted for us. And I'm doing my utmost best to live by that every single day.
So, what were the early days like? Because I just want people to understand that it was a process for you. It
Oh,
wasn't like,
yes.
yeah. So I want
Yeah.
people to see where you were to, and then how you got to where you are.
Yeah,
And by the,
absolutely.
I just
And
want to go back before you answer that question. So
sure.
sorry. I have
No, no,
never
no.
done any exercise where I've looked at life from my brother's perspective. I've always done everything the other way. So I think that's the most
Exactly.
amazing thing. I'm going to try that.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you say that and that you receive that, because that's exactly it. Most people do the writing the letter to them, and then usually it is full of "I wish you were here" or "I miss you so much," or it's all about the absence of them here. Yet when you step into the other's perspective, it becomes all about love and joy and
Yeah.
what you wish for the other person. So it's polar opposite in the outcome. And that's why I feel that shift in perspective is so amazing and so helpful and healing and beautiful. And it's confronting as well. Let's be honest. So my early days were definitely not, as I just said before, it was definitely not a flick the switch or Rob told me be happy, so that's what we do. It was a direction. It was an encouragement. It really felt like my little companion all along. Yeah, the early days were, so let me paint the picture. Rob went on a business trip to Perth, which is 5 hours flights away from where we live. We live in Sydney. And we walked him to the station because it was a Sunday that he flew out. And because we live so close to the station, Rob would often catch the train rather than having to worry about parking and traffic and being there on time. So train ride is just so smooth and gets you straight into the terminal where he needs to be. So we walked him to the station. Rob and I walked hand in hand. The boys were on the scooter and on the bike. And we were waiting there till the train came in, and a little nudge got me to take some pictures of Rob and the boys. And I noticed the nudge, and I'm like, okay. But I just followed it. I didn't overthink it. I just followed it and did it and took a few pictures. And then another thing happened. I took a picture of the train leaving. I have no idea why, but there was this other nudge and take a picture of that train leaving. And it was so bizarre, and I noticed it even stronger, and I'm like, what is this? And then the third thing that was a very big nudge was that my older son cried when Rob left, and he never did. My younger son often did, but my older son never did. He was like, getting on with life, and he was always in the moment, and he cried, and that tugged on my heartstrings. I'm like, what is going on here? But then you get on with your day, you're like busy mom, and then you're all of a sudden you're like a, single mom for a couple of days. And then, the next day Rob was working. It was a public holiday, so the boys were still home. Rob was working. We talked that night, and the conversation was as per usual. We talk about love and connection. He told me about this young couple that he met over dinner and how he talked to them about love and connection. It was an ongoing topic between the two of us. And he said, babe, I think I've given them a lot to think about for life, and I thought it was so beautiful. And then it was I love you, I love you. It's like, I'm going to wake you up, because my phone wasn't updating properly. And he said he'd wake me up the next morning. And I woke up, and it was 7:31, and Rob was supposed to call me at 7:30. And I know that might sound insignificant for a lot of people. It's a minute, but Rob was always on time. So it was the next nudge. I'm like, And then you get on with your day, because the boys had to go to school. My little one was sick, so I had to look after him. Take my older one to school, look after my little one. And I kept texting. I'm like, hey, babe, you okay? You wanted to wake me up. And then the text messages got more and more direct and, more often. And I started calling him. I'm like, what is going on? He's not picking up the phone. There's something going on. So then you start coming up with all the excuses, oh, maybe he forgot the phone in a hotel room, maybe he left it in a cab, maybe, like he did on our wedding night. So I'm coming up with all these things, but my anxiety levels were rising. And on the other hand, I was trying to keep it really cool for my little one. I didn't want to scare him for no reason. And eventually I had this thought of, oh, he left the number of the hotel where he's staying. So I called the hotel, and I'm like, it's Marie Alessi. I know my husband's staying with you. And I said, please don't think I'm one of those freaked out wives stalking her husband, but I know there's something not right. My husband wanted to wake me this morning, and he's not picking up his phone. Can you please send somebody up to his room? And the moment I said that, I had a split second of a vision of Rob collapsing in a shower. And I remember shaking my head physically, going like, don't go there, Marie. Don't drive yourself crazy. But I said it to her. I thought she must have thought I'm losing my marbles. But I said, and can you please check in a shower? And that's where they found him. He had a brain aneurysm in the shower, collapsed and died. So it took 4 more excruciating hours before I knew, because then they didn't pick up the phone anymore. Nobody rang me back. I don't know what was going on. In hindsight, I know they were calling ambulance, police, everybody just rushing up into his room basically. And although they knew he was dead by that time, they still have to, perform CPR till the ambulance comes, all that jazz, what you need to do by law. And speaking about by law, I am forever grateful that one of the sergeants there in charge broke protocol and rang me, because protocol is they have to send police to your house and they tell you in person. But we live in a small country town. There's no manned police station. To get somebody to my house, it was actually hours, because by the time somebody came, I had already packed up my kids and left to tell Rob's parents. So eventually somebody had the heart, and I'm really glad he did, to pick up the phone and call me. And here was a bilingual brain moment, because my mother tongue is German. And he introduced himself as a sergeant from the coroner's office. I had never heard the word coroners before. I learned fast. There was this slow motion moment of me going like, yeah, and like, did you have an accident? Did something happen? And then he said that sentence to me, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning. So that's how I found out. And it was a very surreal, the world was spinning. outside of me and everything inside of me just stopped. And it was so fast and slow at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense. It was
Yeah.
literally, my head was spinning, and everything was just, it was like somebody screeched a needle over the record player and the music stopped. That's how it felt to me. And then I had to tell the boys, and that was by far the hardest thing I ever had to do in my entire life, by far. So no, the beginnings were not easy at all. There was, emotional breakdowns. There was us flying to Perth the next day to identify his body. There was the coming home to an empty house. There was the having to tell his parents in between. There was organising the celebration of life for Rob for 500 people. It was a midweek funeral on a Wednesday. The same week on a Sunday, I walked Jed, our little one, down the aisle to his first Holy Communion. That was freaking tough, for the lack of better words. And that night, I had a full-on breakdown. A full-on breakdown. Oh, I still remember the boys were fighting over brushing the teeth, who would rinse them out first, whatever, what it's like with the little kids. They were 10 and 8, for goodness sake, they were combined not even as old as I was when I lost my dad at 20. So I thought, this is mind-blowing to me. But I remember that eventually, after, calling out a couple of times to ask him to calm down, etc., it just burst out of me. I literally went like, boys, I just need peace and quiet. It was like, it just came out. I just burst out. And as soon as that started, it was like a valve had opened. I just couldn't close it anymore. It was just yelling a sentence over and over until I started screaming it. And then I turned it into primal screaming. And then it was just primal screaming. There were no more words. Pitch tone, primal screaming, me whacking kitchen cupboards on the kitchen floor. I don't even remember how I got on the kitchen floor, to be honest. I just remember it was like an out-of-body experience. It was like me watching myself fall apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop that. And then everything was quiet. Not peaceful at all, but very quiet. And in that absolute stillness, my first thought was just, I have to talk to the boys about this. It was so confronting, and I knew that I need to explain, because I felt so horrible. I felt I had completely failed them as a mom to keep them safe after everything that just happened. I'm losing it and falling apart. I can't let that happen ever again. And in that moment, I made a very life-changing decision. That was literally about 3 weeks after Rob had died, that I need help. That I need help on this journey. I need somebody to hold space for me, because I'm the one holding it for everybody else. And as you see, after 3 weeks, I was at breaking point. I can't hold this for any longer. So I went and saw a positive psychologist, and that really was the starting point of everything that happened thereafter, including the movement that I started. It was, a very, very important decision, and also a very important conversation to have with my boys at such a young age.
So, how did you handle that conversation with your kids?
Very straightforward, very raw. It was very raw, very vulnerable. I remember walking upstairs into the bedroom, and my little one was hiding under the blanket, which was heartbreaking because I could see how scared he was. And my older one was sitting on the bedside, and I sat down next to him, and I put my hand on my little one's leg so he could feel me. And I can't remember if I put my other hand on Flynn or not, but I was literally in triangle with them. We were sitting, and I said, do you know how you talk to Doreen at school? I was their school counselor. And they were like, yeah. And I said, I think I need to talk to somebody too. And my older son said, I think that's a good idea, Mum. So I literally explained to them how helpless I felt and how hard that was for me, and how sorry I am that they had to experience that, me falling apart, and that I don't want that to happen ever again. I want to keep them safe. I want to be there for them, and I will do everything in my mind to work on me so I can be strong for them. So it was a really very honest, very raw conversation. I put it all out there, how I felt. how horrible it felt, that I didn't want to feel like that, and that I'm so sorry that they witnessed it, that I couldn't protect them from that. And in the weirdest way possible, it was the most amazing thing that could have happened. It's weird to say that in hindsight, but 2 days later, one of my sons had a breakdown like that. And I'm so glad that he didn't have to feel there's something wrong with him.
I mean, you did such a beautiful repair. You know, you
Mm,
took this experience, the way I'm viewing it is like you took that experience and you made the bond between your boys stronger because of
yeah,
that repair.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, everything else but joy in that moment, I can tell you that. Mm,
so how did you go from that? Was that the darkest moment that you think you had, or did
yes,
it? Yeah. So how
yes,
did you go
definitely.
from your darkest moments to transforming to joy to starting your movement?
Yeah. I remember sitting in Emily's office. Emily was the positive psychologist that I chose to work with. She was
Can you
absolutely
can
beautiful.
you explain for people who don't know what a positive psychologist is?
Yeah, I keep it super simple. I don't want to
Yeah.
go into too much psychology lingo or whatever, but the psychology is, and some people might want to strangle me for that explanation, but I keep it as normal as possible as I understand it. Okay, it might not be scientifically correct, but this is how I understand and see it. Psychology is there to get you out of a dark place back into neutral, and positive psychology is there to get you from a dark place into back into positive, because when you're in neutral, where do you go from there when you have a bad day, but when you're at a +8, not at a 10 yet, but at a +8 or even a 4, if you have a bad day you can go to a 2 or a 1 maybe, but you're still in a good shape, if that makes sense, or better than 0 or below 0. So that's very very layman terms explanation, but I kind of like to keep this explanation very, very simple, because you'll find when you Google it, there are way more complicated explanations, and please feel free to do so. So yeah, I sat with Emily, and there was also another thing that really puzzled me when I had my first session with her, and I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm in good hands with her. I was so grateful. I was hanging for my next session. I got a phone call like 1 or 2 days before, very, very last minute actually, to say, I'm really sorry, but Emily will have to move the session back by about 2 weeks for family emergency. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I know that sounds very selfish. I know that, but I was in such bad shape at that moment. I shouldn't even, I don't even want to call it bad shape. I was in desperate shape. I really needed help. I needed somebody for me to lean on.
I'm going to
You
interrupt you.
find that person.
I,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I'm going to interrupt you because I actually had this conversation with another guest the other day.
yeah.
It's that as a therapist, because they're a therapist, like how do you deal with that? Because
Yeah,
people are relying on you. People have like their
yeah,
emotions that they're holding in because they know that at 2
yeah,
p.m. on Tuesday, they're going to be able to
yeah,
let them out. And
yeah,
then you have
yeah,
to.
yeah,
And so like from my perspective, I feel like that there can be a little bit, the trust between therapist and patient
mm,
can be affected. So how did
yeah.
that affect you?
I love that you say that, because it's so spot on. I'm a coach and I work with people to help them through their journey of grief. So I really understand how people are sometimes hanging for this 2 o'clock appointment, as you said, from both ends. I do understand that very well. Um, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna get straight to the point. Why she postponed the session? Her mom died. Shall I say more?
No.
Like, that to me was like, what and how on earth do I get that one therapist whose mom dies 2 days before our next session? And I know Emily, if she hears that, will understand that the right way when I say that. It was the biggest blessing in disguise, because she knew when she worked with me, like hands on, what I was going through in that very moment, even though every journey is so different, but she knew what I needed and how to be there for me and how to hold space. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. So, fast forward, um, I was in a session with Emily one day when I talked to her about these expectations of people, how they all sort of wait for you to fall apart. The expectation of grief is your life is now over, or your life will never be the same. I'll get back to that later, that very sentence. And there's all these expectations around, everything's around falling apart or sadness, or there'll always be this hole in my life, this hole in my heart. There's really rather negative language and expectation around grief, and that's why I'm so big on changing this narrative of grief, changing the language around grief. I want to advocate for grief and how we can deal with it differently. So Emily, in her beautiful, beautiful manner, looked at me and said, "So what does grief mean to you, Marie?" I still remember her gentle smile, and she said that to me, and I'm like, whoa, okay. I said the first word that came up was empowerment. That is really bizarre. I did not expect that. And she said, wow, okay. Do you want to talk about that? And I said, yeah, there is, and it really brought me back to the initial reason why I went and saw Emily, that immense primal power I felt when I fell apart is also the exact power that we have within us to rebuild ourselves once we learn how to harness that. And that to me was something that was happening with the guidance of want you to have a happy life, with the direction that Rob and I have chosen for our lives before he even died. I knew that that's what I wanted to do with that power. And to me, that was really surprising, that word, that was the first word that comes up when I get asked what grief means. And I just looked at her and I said, I think I need to write a book about this. And she said, I think you should. So I did. 5 weeks later, I had written and published Loving Life After Loss, my first book. And to my, again, very own surprise, it ranked in the top 100 bestseller list of Australia. So that blew me away. I'm like, okay, that was supposed to be a love legacy for Rob, but maybe a book that the boys can read one day. I did not expect that to go that far. And that was the seed planted for me, then creating a movement out of that only months later. Because straight after we published the book, I took the boys traveling around the world. I packed them up and we traveled for 2 months just to get away from all these first milestones without Rob. The Christmas, the birthdays, New Year's, all of that was coming up for us. And I needed to get out. I needed to get away from everybody staring at us. How's she going to handle that? I needed to travel. Rob and I had planned to travel for an entire year with the boys. They didn't know that at the time. We had still kept it secret. So instead of going, okay, I can't travel without Rob for a year, which I couldn't, I went like, what can I do? What can I do right now? And that was 2 months, 9 countries on my own with the boys. And it was the best thing I've ever done. And we still talk about this trip now. We both loved it. The 3 of us. We loved our journey. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's so inspiring to hear you talk about it and
Thank
see
you.
grief in such a different way.
Mm.
So you talk about the hidden gifts. What
Mm-hmm.
gifts did you find?
Oh, how long have we got?
It's beautiful.
I have to say a lot. It takes a little while before you can put your focus on that. As I said, nothing in grief is a flick the switch solution. Nothing that I offer as healing tools is you use that today and tomorrow you'll be fine. Everything, yeah, like you said, it's a process, it's a journey. It is really allowing that space to grieve, to feel all of it. And I love the visual that grief and joy can go hand in hand. And they want to be this couple that are allowed to be seen in public holding hands. It's that Romeo and Juliet thing. You can't, you cannot, you don't go together. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And the weirdest thing is, before somebody dies, it's completely normal. Sadness, joy, laughter, everything can happen simultaneously and multiple times back and forth in a day. Nobody even thinks about it twice. It's normal. It's all part of life, right? But as soon as somebody passes, it's like, ooh, you can't possibly be happy. Or you couldn't laugh in a church at a funeral. I'm like, why not? Like, when I read the eulogy for Rob, it was all about the fun and beautiful person he was. There was laughter in the room. There were jokes being shared by his best friend, by me, by his siblings. It was beautiful to see that laughter in church at a funeral, because that was a celebration of his life and not reducing his entire life to his moment of passing. That's what most people do at a funeral. And we didn't. We celebrated his life, and I love that. So I think I've forgotten your initial question. Literally, I just walked around in circles and then I get
No,
sidetracked with.
that was so beautiful what you said. I was asking about the hidden gift.
Sorry, yes. So that was already one of them, the hidden gifts in adversity, having that gift of laughter at the funeral. But also, so often in life, we hear when it comes to somebody dying, somebody very close to you dying, you're like, nothing prepares you for that. And I have learned to say, often not loud, but to myself, really? Or maybe it did. Because when I look back now and I think, well, nothing prepares you for your husband dying like that from a brain aneurysm, right? He's away on a business trip at the age of 45, super healthy, strong, fit, surfer, you know. And then you look back and all of a sudden you see all those little and big steps that happened in your entire life leading up to that. And I'm like, oh my God, I have been prepared for this moment all through my life. I mean, my dad passed when I was 20. I mentioned that before. Did not handle the grief well at all. I had no idea how to deal with it. I was so close to my dad, and nobody gives you tools to deal with that. Nobody teaches you that. It isn't taught at schools, although I think it should be. When you think of the statistics, how many kids lose their parent before they turn 18. It's 1 in 20 in Australia. I know it's 1 in 14 in Utah because I had a conversation with a lady there the other day. So it's a huge statistic for that not being taught to teachers and in school. And then you see, like I often thought, what I had with my dad, what I learned from his passing was to never leave anything unsaid. When I think you've got amazing hair, which I think, by the way, then I tell you. And I think you look absolutely beautiful. And I will tell you that even if I just, glided into the situation, into the conversation, I walk past strangers and tell them when I think they've got funky shoes or they have a beautiful smile or I think the couple looks beautiful holding hands. I give them a, love heart walking past, or I tell them. I do it all the time, every single day. And that to me gave me the most beautiful and present conversation and relationship and life and marriage with my husband. That to me was a gift from my dad. Although he wasn't around anymore for our wedding, that was my wedding gift from him, to have that with my husband. That's one of the biggest hidden gifts in adversity that I learned through my dad's passing. Or Rob teaching me the power of two choices. He taught me that way before I even became a coach. He would always say that to me. It's like, babe, two choices, where do you live your life from fear or from love, from happiness or from sadness? What do you focus on in life? It's your choice. He kept saying that to me all the time. That became the biggest gift for me in our adversity. People often say, well, I didn't choose for my husband to die. And in my head, again, I very, very, very rarely say that out loud unless I really know I can say that with a friend, with a person. I know them well enough, but I wouldn't say that out loud. But in my head, I go like, really? I think from a spiritual perspective I strongly believe I had this spiritual epiphany only weeks after I passed, where I thought, oh my God, we have chosen this. On a soul level, that's the journey that we have chosen. I strongly believe in that. And I want to put an asterisk in here, go like, okay, disclaimer. I know everybody's faith is different and I want to really honor that, but this is my perspective. This is my belief, my spiritual belief that Rob and I have chosen that. But even that set aside to honor everyone's faith and go like, okay, let's just leave that for now. Okay, let's say you haven't chosen that your husband passed away. I get that. But now you can choose what you do with it. What you do with it going forward is up to you. And I'm coming back to the sentence that you used before and that many people use, that your life will never be the same. Of course not. How can it? But what it will look like is up to you. What you do with it is up to you. Whether you see it from your perspective, having lost your brother, or whether you see it from his perspective, live your life. I want you to enjoy and be happy. It's up to you. We all have all these perspectives available to us at any given time, yet society has taught us that we see it from the sadness perspective, and I am not going to buy into that. I'm not saying I was never sad. It was freaking hard for me to go through this. I can promise you that. Yet I had a choice, and I made a choice every single day. And it wasn't always positive. I can promise you that too. There were days where I just literally didn't have it in me to go like, you know what, today I'm choosing joy and it's all going to be good. No, I fell apart and I cried and I screamed, and I had all of the above. Yet the direction always stayed the same. I wanted this happy life for the boys and myself because I know that we deserve it, and I know that that's what love is, and that's a perspective I choose for our lives. I want to live it from the perspective of love, no matter what, even on the hard days.
That is so, so beautiful. Um, I want to ask you this because I feel like not everyone deals with the grief of the loss of a loved one, but they deal
Mm.
with grief in other ways, like the loss of a job or the loss of the
Yeah, yeah,
potential. So when you're working with
absolutely.
people, are you able to take your techniques and do that with a situation or something that is not a loved one?
100%. I am able to do that, and I have done it before. Yet I prefer working with people who've actually experienced the death of a loved one because, it's like when you're really, really good at something, it's a really good choice to stick to that and not, if you're trying to work, let's say, on a luxury limo and somebody asks you to repair a VW Beetle, I could possibly do it. Yeah, of course. But I much prefer, and maybe that's a wrong comparison because I don't want to say this is luxury. It's not at all. It was probably the very wrong comparison. I've never used this before. It just came to me. But, when you have one thing that you really specialize in, I don't have to put a luxury or not luxury on it at all. If you have one thing that you're really good at, I think it's quite important for the clients you work with to stick to that because they will feel it. And I am a big believer that there's a huge difference between learned and lived experience. You will feel it when somebody works with you. And I want to do what I know that I'm good at. I know what success I can have when I work with people who have experienced the death of a loved one and how I can help them change their perspective and get a really beautiful quality in life. I feel like I'm almost buddied up with their loved ones when I work with them, if that makes sense. So I feel very honored when people choose me to do that for them or to walk that path with them.
That makes sense. It's beautiful. You have such a beautiful energy and just
Oh,
really.
thank you so much. Thank you.
As we draw towards the end of our conversation, is there anything that you wished I asked you or you have on your heart that you'd want to share?
I love this conversation. I really loved what we talked about. I think it's that the only thing I really want to emphasize is that we are allowed to heal. I think a lot of people need to hear that. We often feel like, oh, it's frowned upon, or there's this expectation that coming back to the hole in the heart, you'll always have this hole in your heart. I don't see it like that. I don't use that language. I much prefer to say I'll always have a space in my heart for Rob. It feels so much more expansive and healing. I for a fact know that when people work on that, their heart becomes bigger and bigger and their joy in life is just phenomenal. And as I'm saying that, the sun comes up. It's so beautiful. My whole room just lit up. I love this. Orchestrated by Rob. Thanks, babe. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
I think the easiest is always to send them to my website, mariealessi.com, because from there you can follow me on all socials or connect with me on LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. I spend a lot more time on LinkedIn these days than on Facebook, but I'm on Insta. You can just book a chat with me if you want to. It's all there on the website.
It's been so wonderful talking with you today. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time and just what you've shared is so beautiful and your energy is so beautiful. I think this is an amazing conversation. It's going to add so much value to people.
Thank you
So thank
so
you.
much. That oozed straight into my heart. Thank you so much for having me, Natasha.